Welcome back to Talk Fast, Turn Left. I'm Haley Ferrario, and this series invites your favorite Splunkers to talk about what they are most looking forward to in next week's Splunks.conf 21. But we're putting them behind the wheel and sending them out nearly 200 miles an hour on Las Vegas Motor Speedway for interviews. Virtually, of course. If you haven't signed up for Splunks.conf 21, then what are you doing? It's free, it's virtual, and it's your best chance to experience Splunk's data to everything platform all year. And don't miss the Bots, Boo, and Data Drivers events next week's too. Links to sign up for all of these great events are in the chat. Now, let's get to Talk Fast, Turn Left with your host, Cory Mitten.
Well, thanks, Haley. We are really excited to see how James Hodge, Chief Strategy Advisor for Splunk, does in today's Talk Fast, Turn Left. James, how you feeling about your chances here in this race?
Well, I think like everyone, I'm just panicking about the form-up lap because I'm really close to ramming the car in front.
You're not new to iRacing. This is something you've done in the past, but you're racing on a single screen today, which is a little different than your usual VR setup. Do you think you're going to be as fast or slower because of the change in setups?
So I'm going to put it this way: if I'm faster, it's because I didn't use VR, and if I'm not faster, it's because I didn't use VR. So I'm lining my excuses up already.
It's very wise. It's very wise. Well, James, the folks that have paid attention to kind of what Splunk is doing in and around esports and in and around our relationship with McLaren have probably seen you, and maybe if the folks that are joining us from the UK may have seen you from Sky News recently. So, James, tell us what's your role and what's your stake in this thing at Splunk as we think about our relationship with McLaren.
So I think I've got one of the coolest jobs at Splunk. I'm literally here racing computer games for Splunk, but for a really good reason. About to go green. What I mainly focus on is how do we advise our customers to be ready for the future? We think about everything we're doing, it's digitizing, it's super exciting, and that's what we saw in McLaren and their esports program. It's just, here we go, green. It's the future. It's the beginning of being able to take like digital racing and physical racing and starting to compare the two. And that's kind of was a super exciting opportunity for us. That's where you and I started talking a lot on the racing series last year. Yeah.
So it's you're underway, and for folks that have watched the previous couple of Talk Fast Turn Left, you may notice a little something different here. We've got a lot of cars on track, and that's thanks to iRacing's AI capabilities. Getting a little bit bumpy there, huh? It's hard to figure out where everybody is when you don't have the VR experience. That's right. So
qualifying's so much easier
when everybody's not bothered you. So yeah. you talked about the fact that Splunk is a sponsor of McLaren Racing. So as you've been involved in that relationship, I'm curious. Like you have to have like a highlight of what was the coolest thing that's happened as a part of our relationship here at Splunk with the team at McLaren.
So I think the coolest thing was watching the McLaren 1-2. Unfortunately, it was on TV, but I was watching it, not live there. Yeah. But the bigger reason is, if you look at McLaren, Zach Brown came on board, Andreas came on board, they brought on a couple of great drivers, and they are transforming their business. And it's everything. It's not just the car. It's about digital operations, racing operations, their mentality. And to see all of that work product come out, that was just amazing for us to see for the team. And to see how happy everyone was at McLaren and how it inspired them to look at what they can do next. So 100% a highlight for me.
Yeah, it was a crazy race. My family was going nuts as a part of our relationship with McLaren. I think so many Splunkers have gotten into F1 racing, and look at that nice pass taking up the high line. That was smooth. I like that. So many of us have gotten into it, and my kids have become like super fans of F1 now. And so that Monaco 1-2 was out of this world. Now, one thing that's that maybe a lot of folks probably watching they get it. But this esports thing and this sim racing thing is a big deal. Like for folks that maybe are into racing, but they haven't really kind of watched what's happening in esports, it is a massive sort of industry and business model that's taking place. What's Splunk's stake in this as we think about esports? I know you said it's the future, but maybe unpack that a little bit. Like, what does it mean for us to start to bring, data out of these kinds of platforms?
But I think where we started was with the Formula One team. The racing on the cars, just incredible. But what we started to spot was we actually started the relationship with McLaren just when COVID hit. And so we suddenly went from, we were excited about going racing to suddenly we couldn't go anywhere. And we started with this Formula One series and the what's it called? Esports? Not Esports, the F1 did a series.
Mm-hmm.
We started to look at that and thought, hang on a minute, this is a computer game. Computer games generate data. And so we looked into it and we were able to get all of the telemetry out of the F1 Codemasters game and start to be able to display that back to Lando and the celebrity drivers, which is like super cool. But what it really showed us was a different way of thinking about sports and the accessibility into sports. I mean, Cory, you mentioned your kids. I have 2 small kids who are now super McLaren fans, but we're able to sit in my office with a steering wheel, drive around some iconic tracks and make them feel engaged with the sport. And I think it was a unique opportunity to see that there is a sport with such a close digital matchup to the physical sport itself. I pretty much have 2 left feet when it comes to football or soccer, but when it comes to driving, I actually have a chance to have fun. Whereas FIFA, I can be amazing at FIFA. It's not going to improve my football game.
Yeah, that is actually a wild thing that for me was probably one of the most sort of eye-opening realities about sim racing and driving is that you're right. It's absolutely a transferable set of skills, right? If you're turning this wheel, in the car in a sim, it's much the same in terms of the feedback. Like you're using your eyes and the feel of the wheel to understand what's happening in the car. So accessibility is incredible for us to be able to go from, if you could drive fast in a sim, you can maybe drive fast in a real car. And actually it brings me to a great sort of next point, which is there's this thing called the Logitech G challenge, which there was a driver, I think it was James Baldwin, that won that a couple years ago and then got a seat to go ride in a real race car and actually excelled at it.
Yeah, and you can see that from, take Lando Norris, huge, F1 superstar. He's really on the forefront of that, but also a massive gamer. And one of the things I was kind of told by the McLaren team is occasionally in Lando's first season, he went out to Circuit of the Americas, and his first couple of laps were blisteringly fast because in a way he forgot he was in a racing car, and he was so used to the sim from not their sim, as in the F1 game, that he knew every turn, every time to turn in. And he just, automatically just took over before he started to realize, hang on a minute, I'm in the Formula One car. This is kind of scary. And he saw a little dip in his lap times and then back up again. And I think that is the amazing bit. And taking people like James and others, it's sports about fun, right? We do it because of the spectacle, but we want to do it because we can have some fun in it. And I think with computers nowadays, it's so immersive to be able to get into kind of gaming. And I think racing is it's one of the best. I love it.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I think for the folks that maybe didn't see what we've done over the last 6 months with this data driver series here at Splunk, I highly encourage folks to go back and check it out. And the links are available if you scan the QR code on screen or check the link in the chat. But basically we've brought this idea of let's use sim racing as something that's, as you said, James, it's fun, it's accessible, folks around the world can do it and they could do it collaboratively and together, that's fun and awesome, especially in a COVID world, to have like a hobby, a thing to do where you can feel connected to friends and, coworkers, which was fun. We did the races and that was awesome. But the really intriguing part, I think, was that, we actually spent, after every race, we would then go and work to figure out ways to solve challenges with data that were challenges that the McLaren Shadow team were having, and we used Splunk to solve those challenges. So, in your working with the team at McLaren and McLaren Shadow, what are the interesting ways that you see them bringing data to esports maybe that we haven't done before?
I think the first thing, right now, I want to see Doug's lap times, Teresa's lap time, where I'm turning in wrong, where I'm turning in right, because of course I want to beat them. I desperately want to beat them. Obviously. And exactly the same with the esports team. Mm-hmm. One of the things that actually makes the biggest difference is looking at things like car setups. Mm-hmm. I had no comprehension how good the physics engines are in things like iRacing and F1. And so, car setup can make a massive difference in performance. So allowing the team to be able to tweak setups, do test runs, being able to see the data, how they perform in corners, total speed, the amount of gear changes they had to do, when they brake, when they don't brake, compare it to each other, kind of really starts to allow people to make better decisions. We talk about turning data into doing at Splunk, and that's the whole point of it. Can I use this data to ultimately one day, Cory, beat you? Or take the the McLaren Shadow team to be able to make them just better and better and better and enjoy things more.
Yeah, it is. That's true. I mean, we are trying to bring data to every question, decision, and action, and I do want to use it for competitive advantage. And actually, I want to say a big thanks to the McLaren Shadow team manager, Tobin Lee, who's been a great partner for us. I know you've worked with Tobin some. I had the opportunity to interview him a number of times and get his perspective on how we could use data to solve some challenges for he and the team there at McLaren Shadow. But then, James, you're racing a series that isn't all that popular in the UK. This whole NASCAR thing. Is this your first time behind the wheel of a NASCAR?
Yeah, and it's weird just turning left. Yeah, I know this whole thing is cool. Was it turn left, talk fast?
Yeah.
Didn't comprehend. I was just literally turning left. And I'm actually getting an appreciation for it. It's a different skill set.
It is. It's all about that laser focus for that longer race, because the races, unlike an F1 race that's around 90 minutes, the races here can oftentimes be 4 or 5 hours. They can cover, 300, 400, 500 miles in a race. And especially when you start to get into the pro level, you start to get these cars that run in these large, the train of cars that they're drafting one another, and it's a completely different skill set. Now, I think the challenge here is I've got AI cars that I didn't make them fast enough. You and the other folks that are the humans driving, you're dominating the AI. How's that feel to beat artificial intelligence, James?
Awesome. Like truly awesome. Because I battle with it so much as my day job.
Right.
But actually, talking about beating things, one of the most amazing racing you and I did last year was we did a series, and I've forgotten the name of it. It was Data Drivers, and we brought some of the McLaren team in, the Shadow development drivers. And watching them go past, you just realize how good some of the team really are. Yeah. And I remember chatting to them afterwards, and they really enjoyed it as well, because we thought, they'd find it frustrating, got amateur hour, people spinning all over the shop. And I think the thing they said that was most fun was trying to dodge all of us. As they continually lapses, they said actually it made it a really challenging race for them.
Yeah, it's a humbling experience to have these young, like as you mentioned, the development drivers, specifically Tomek, who I saw just recently announced again to come back to McLaren Shadow for another year. So congrats to Tomek, but he beat the pants off of us in those GT3 cars. It was crazy. Actually, and another driver that has been a great partner for us is Blake Reynolds, who's he drives the 66 car for the McLaren Shadow in the Coca-Cola eNASCAR series. And he's actually one of the biggest proponents, as you mentioned, James, of how do I take all this historical data that we've collected from iRacing and take that historical data and use things like machine learning to figure out and help with those setups? Because everything we've done in this data driver series has really been about this live, streaming data in real time, making decisions for pit strategy, which is critically important based on tires and fuel and that kind of stuff. But this idea of setups, that's a whole nother can of worms that we haven't even tackled yet that I'm really excited about. But speaking of can of worms, we've got .conf is around the corner. It's literally next week. That is a can of worms of amazing stories and technology sessions. But I'm curious from your perspective, what are you most excited about as you think about .conf next week?
I think this is going to be my 9th .conf as a Splunker. Wow. So that's a lot of .confs. And for me, I'm still really super excited about it because there is so much there. And I think one of the things that really resonated from me last year, or 2 years ago, I was out there with Edward Green, who is leads kind of racing technology for the F1 team.
Yeah.
And what he kind of said to me was the thing that he loved about .conf was the idea sharing. Didn't matter how big a data set is or, what company you were from. It was this kind of philosophy of we can learn from each other about some super cool ideas that we haven't really thought of before and what we can do next. So, this is my 9th conf, and every year I learned something that I didn't realize we can actually do with Splunk. And that's what I'm super excited about. Plus figuring out if I beat Doug.
That's right. We'll announce that for sure. Well, and for those of you who are watching who maybe don't know what .conf is, Splunk, as we've talked about, a data platform company that focuses on security, IT operations, and software development. But we're obviously using our data platform to bring data to racing and esports like never before. And so we actually have our big annual user conference next week, and it is a completely virtual conference with airings of the content, both on demand and in times that make sense for the folks around the globe. So James, you're not going to have to, stay up crazy late to enjoy.conf, even though, a lot of it is being broadcast out of the US. It's obviously, going to be consumed all over the world. And so I invite folks to definitely join. The link is available in the chat and in the QR code, and it's totally free, which is kind of great. You can actually get some access to some great learning. And I do want to shamelessly plug, we have a session, James, that I'm very excited about. That's all about data drivers, and it's actually going to peel back the kind of behind the curtain a little bit of all the things that we did in Splunk to make data drivers possible, and all the stuff that we learned technically that we think is really interesting. So I definitely want to plug that. But your buddy Edward that you mentioned earlier, he's speaking again at .conf this year, isn't he?
He is. Yeah, he is. And I think one of the things that's so cool about Conf is, you get these random presentations, like things like, Splunking Esports. You never would have thought that was a thing when the company was started. But when he actually started,
Save. That was you went from NASCAR to Tokyo Drift right there.
So what we didn't do the other data stream, which is my Apple Watch. I think we were just seeing a nice little spike there.
Your heart rate.
This is way harder than appearing on like national live TV.
Which you've done, which is incredible. We'll drop a link to that interview. That's awesome. Well, have you gotten the checkered flag yet? You should be pretty close.
No, must be close.
Pretty close. I think the white flag may be out if you look in that top left-hand corner. And James, you are doing incredible. You're actually in second place in the race, and you're running some pretty impressive lap times. I think you're going to pair up well. Now tomorrow we've got Teresa Carlson, new president and chief growth officer here at Splunk. And then Friday, we've got Doug Merritt. And then we've had Juliana Vita and Spiros. Where do you think you're going to rank in the 5? Do you think you're going to win it as the dude who's probably got the most experience, or you think there's somewhere middle of the pack?
I'm hoping I'm near the front. But when you mention like Teresa and Doug, realizing that's like my boss's boss's boss and her boss, maybe it might be good for them to win.
Maybe we'll see if we can give them a slightly better setup than you. Well, James, it's been super fun. Did you get the checkered flag?
I think I did.
All right. Well, congratulations. So now you get the opportunity to do the always fun burnouts, which is basically one of the best things about these NASCARs is they will just spin easy.
Straight into the wall. Whoa.
Look at that. Oh, you saved it. That's brilliant. Well, James, it's been super fun to have you here on Talk Fast, Turn Left. I do want to say, encourage you, James, to come back and join us next week during .conf. We have the Lights Out Racing Championship Series that we're going to be hosting. And, James, you'll get a kick out of this. It's actually going to be 3 races that are the quali races. So we'll have one Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and there will be races that, will fit in time zones across the world so that we can get all the audiences involved. And the race will actually be run at Circuit of the Americas, which is where the F1 race is next week. And I'm bummed I'm not going to get to go to that race. I really want to be in the paddock with the McLaren team, but I don't get to go. But the funny thing is we're going to be doing Circuit of the Americas in a Miata, the MX-5.
That's the hardest car to drive in iRacing by far.
That's exactly right. So we're going to qualify in there. And then the final race, the championship race on Thursday, we're actually going to do kind of a ridiculous thing where we're going to have a reverse order grid where the fastest qualifiers, the people who qualify in the quali races fastest, we're going to divide up the whole grid into 4 groups. And the fastest group is going to have to drive the 1987 Dale Earnhardt NASCAR that is the same car that Zach Brown owns, that Daniel Ricciardo said that if he won a race, he bet and he wanted to drive it. So they're going to drive that car on COTA. The next group is going to drive like the next gen NASCAR. Then the next group's going to drive the 720S GT3 car, I think it's the GT4 car, and then the slowest group, the folks who really struggled with it, they're going to get a proper F1 car from McLaren to drive and compete in the championship. So we're going to have a massive disparity in cars and skills potentially that hopefully evens the field. If nothing else, it's going to make for a great race broadcast.
There is going to be a lot of metal and carbon fiber all over the track in that race.
Well, for the iRacing geeks out there, we're going to have it as unlimited fast repairs. So you'll be able to repair all the cars as quickly as possible. Well, James, nice. I'm looking forward to all that Splunk has in store with McLaren. Thank you for being part of Talk Fast, Turn Left. And if people want to keep up with you on social, what's the best platform to interact with Mr. Hodge?
On LinkedIn or Twitter at the Data James.
At the Data James. Well, James, thanks again for joining us. And as we always say, whatever you're into, be data driven and join Data Drivers.